Hey everybody, how's it going? We're back for the August Q&A video here, and we've only got one question this month, but it is a bit of a doozy, so I'm going to say we might as well just get started and jump right into it. All right, so our first and only question for this month comes in from Nicholas. Nicholas writes, I was wondering what your thoughts were on the Lessons Animation Taught Us project Movies with Mikey did last year. I know the Mr. Freeze video is how a lot of people first got exposure to the channel, and was wondering what it's like being a content creator in a project like that. Oh boy. Nicholas, you have opened a Pandora's box without ever, I assume, not really even realizing it. So I have a lot of thoughts about that video, because as you mentioned there, it is as of right now, the only video I've ever made that was fortunate enough to be blessed by the almighty algorithm, and thus, yeah, it is like 90% of the views and subs on my channel are pretty much just from that one video blowing up, at least certainly relative to all my other videos. But to try and keep this somewhat on track, I'm going to try and limit my discussion to just the particulars of your question, so try and keep it just in the realm of being part of the Movies with Mikey Lessons Animation Taught Us oeuvre, if you will. So I guess the first thing right off the bat, obviously, is that being a part of something like that is really cool, because especially it didn't. The video didn't get this sort of traction, didn't blow up with the algorithm till a good like 6 months after it came out, around the time when Mikey released his second Lessons Animation Taught Us video. So it had a good 6 months there where it was still fairly small time, and I mean I was very small time. I want to say by the time I released it, I think I was still only around like 300 subscribers, and like was I think only about 400 subscribers like 6 months later when it blew up and then got me to about 4,000 subscribers, just for relative context there to what that one video blowing up did for my channel. So like having, back then I was happy with videos getting, a couple hundred views within a week or so, right? So having a video of mine in basically a playlist on the official Film Joy channel, and also not only having it on this much bigger channel who's like, I obviously really like Mikey's videos. That's, why I saw his videos in the first place, why I thought to make my own Lessons Animation Taught Us video. But also, seeing it in that playlist with a bunch of other creators who I also, really look up to, like Ian Danskin had his video in there, Maggie Mayfish, What's So Great About That? Like a bunch of really other good video essayists were in that playlist, and mine was like right up there, alongside them. And so that was really, encouraging, and I guess validating, really, more than anything. And of course, while it was still relatively small compared to what happened a little bit later when the algorithm got a hold of it, still, that was still by far my most seen video, just because of the fact that it was in that playlist, right? So that was really awesome. I will say, as far as thinking about that particular video by itself, well, I have somewhat mixed feelings about it now. Is that I'll preface it by saying I try to stay as cognizant of this as possible when thinking about my previous videos, but I do honestly believe that that video was as good as I could have made it at the time. It's obviously, if I went back and redid it now, or just tried to start from scratch and did it now, I think I would do it differently, and I think overall it would probably be a better video. But I try not to beat myself up too much about it, because, like I said, I do think for who I was as a video creator at the time, I think I got the most out of my abilities back then. It's certainly the hardest I've ever worked on a video. I would say the Ava videos that I've just put out are probably the most I've ever worked on a video, but I definitely think the Mr. Freeze video is definitely the hardest, because it was uh, probably, I think, in a more condensed amount of time, and just really like by the end there, I think to get that thing finally across the finish line, I think I stayed up for around 25 hours straight, I think, with only a couple breaks in between, like maybe a couple hour long breaks to eat something and just not look like a computer screen. For the most part, I did. I think it went like over 24 hours straight working on that video to get it finally across the finish line. In fact, I'll throw out one little side note here, for anyone who really wants to take a deep dive on my work. So the around that time I was doing a Let's Play also with my friend John. We were doing it over Yakuza 0. We were putting it up on his channel, which now are also now on my second channel, which is what this video is on right now. So you can go find it here if you want. But the first episode of that Let's Play we did while I was taking a break from working on the Mr. Freeze video. So like I want to say probably about hour 20 to 22, somewhere in that range. I was just like, I need to take a break from this. And we had previously, I think it was just our usual day to do a Let's Play, to record one. And I think John was like, we don't have to do this today if you don't want to. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm not going to bed. I need to finish this video, but I also can't look at this anymore right now. So let's go ahead and do it. So you can watch that first Let's Play of Yakuza 0 and see, hear what it's like to be me recording a Let's Play on like no sleep. And I will say to my credit, I don't think you can really tell unless I told you that. So way to go, me. But back to the video more specifically, the things that I'm kind of mixed on now are just basically, say I was to do that video again now, I think it'd be much better about making it more my own, which I mean makes sense, right? Because we're over a year now. I just realized a couple days ago it's been a year since I put that video out. I have more an idea of what my own style is, right? And there are just parts of the video of like, there's just little things like the fact that there's a title card before talking about each episode that gives the date or the year when the episode came out. And literally the only reason I did that is because Mikey did it in his first video, and then Ian did it in his video over Princess Mononoke. And so I was just like, okay, yeah, cool. That's the set style for a lessons animation taught us video. It's not like you don't have to do that at all. But there's little things like that, but then there's also just big structural things like I maybe wouldn't go so far in depth in recapping each episode. I kind of was playing around with like other creators I like Games is Lit 101 does his like literary analysis where he takes up most of the video is a lot of him just kind of recapping the plot. And he gives little asides and analysis, throughout as well, which I also try to do. And I think that works for him perfectly. Like I really like those videos. I don't know so much that I like that. I just don't know that that's exactly what I want to do with my stuff now is kind of how I think about it. It's also interesting to see what some people come for because there is a steep drop off once you hit about 2/3 of the way through that video and then you just full on recap stop and it's just 100% analysis. The audience retention rate drops off a cliff. So, I mean, clearly there are reasons for doing those types of videos. People obviously like them. I think people like just being able to remember, like it's, instead of spending, an hour watching those 3 episodes, or I guess more than that if it's 2 episodes in a movie, spend 15 to 20 minutes just listening to someone recap it in hopefully a fairly coherent and entertaining way. You kind of get that same, you get to relive those memories a little bit and be like, oh yeah, I like those episodes. I like that one part, without having to spend all that time actually going back and tracking down those episodes and finding them and watching them and everything. But like I said, I don't know that's necessarily something I want to do with my videos necessarily going forward. So the last thing I'll touch on is still kind of related to the idea of things that I learned from that particular video, although it is much more about how it blew up later. But I think it's worth mentioning because it's probably one of the biggest things I've taken away for making any of my videos going forward. But if we're going to talk about that, I need to actually go a little back further to the very first video I made, not necessarily because of the video itself, but kind of basically my philosophy around making videos from the very start has always been, even back at the very beginning of 2018 when I first put out a video, YouTube was already a highly contested field, so to speak. You had your left-wing type creators, your H-Bomber guys, ContraPoints, PhilosophyTube, such and such. You had your alt-right shitbags that I will not name off here. But all that being said, obviously, so me being a content creator who's going to start making videos and putting them on YouTube, I'm well aware of this dichotomy, right? And I wanted to be sure I was making videos that could not even just accidentally be in any way associated with anything on that far right of the spectrum. I didn't want to have someone be a subscriber and then a year in all of a sudden be like, oh, what? You're like, you have all these weird progressive views about how, like, women are people and such and such. So my philosophy for making every single video was that basically I wanted to make sure if you watched any video I made, it was abundantly clear which side of this divide I fell on, right? I wanted there to be no ambiguity. And so my main strategy for this was I didn't want to give anything that could even be construed as a devil's advocate or other side of the coin type of argument any air. So I was just going to treat all of these subjects, that could be touchy like that, SJW type subjects. I was just going to take the, progressive approach, the approach that I generally do believe on with pretty much all that stuff, and just treat that as fact. We're not going to look at the other side of the argument. We're not going to devil's advocate anything here. We're just going to treat that as fact. We're going to state it, and then we're going to move on. And, if someone didn't like that, meant they would probably just, stop watching the video, not subscribe, and I'd never see them again. And I was perfectly fine with that. And that worked fine while I was still a small channel. The thing that I learned, though, when that Mr. Freeze video blew up is I feel like I was really underestimating, how not plugged in so many people are to this very particular and I think important, but also still kind of on both sides of this left and right YouTube thing, how it is still kind of a bit of a bubble, at least as related to YouTube as a whole, which is enormous, gigantic thing. Because, looking at the analytics for when that Mr. Freeze video blew up, like, I was getting views off of just like suggested videos from people watching like the new Infinity War or Endgame, whatever the latest Avengers movie that was out, just like the most like, broad general of the general type audience possible, right? And, there's a section in the Mr. Freeze video, it's only about like 30 seconds long, where I just point out that the fact that Mr. Freeze's main motivation throughout the whole series is his comatose wife, who, is not a character, is very literally just an object, a reason for his motivation, is not an actual person at all. And how that's, if you're in this kind of world, if you've watched a bunch of these type of video essays, you know why that would be a bad thing, and why that could be something that is clearly could be done better. But if you're not in this world, if you haven't watched all like, Lindsay Ellis or Folding Ideas or Hbomberguy, if you've not watched all this stuff, then, maybe my video actually is the first time you're encountering an idea like that. And so, unsurprisingly, overwhelmingly, a lot of the comments were all about this one little section, about Nora, and wow, it's actually perfectly fine. Like, it makes the story more sad. It makes you, more sympathetic to Mr. Freeze's cause, and that's what makes him such a great character. And, granted, sure, some of those comments were definitely the usual bad faith comments, and boy, I got real good. I made a real good, anti-alt-right word speak filter just based on a lot of the comments I got. I'm like, all right, add that one to the list. That one's going to the list. That one's going on the list. So my filter game is way stronger now because of that, I guess, thankfully. But, there were also a lot of comments that were, I won't say good faith, and don't want to try and sound too pretentious here, but just a little bit more ignorant, just not as aware of this kind of conversation that's been going on in these particular spaces that, I find myself spending a lot of time in on YouTube. And basically, I just felt like I realized that it was kind of a missed opportunity, that, if I had taken the time to really go into more of the specifics of the why this is a bad thing, even though it feels a bit redundant to me who's seen so much of this stuff like that, and it kind of feels like, am I just covering the same territory over and over again that's been said a million times? I realize it's important to consider, just because you have heard it a million times. And I think as a creator, as any creator that I've talked to, we get concerned about trying to be somewhat original, adding something new to the conversation. But I guess we maybe overly prioritize making everything in the video new and original. Whereas maybe it's more important that we just add, one little new wrinkle or one just little twist on something. And it's fine if we are covering some of the same territory again, because you just never know what your audience has seen before. So from there, I kind of just made the decision that, I didn't like the idea that I could be missing opportunities to kind of further people along on their, education of media analysis, right? So I think you clearly see this in something like the Telltale video and the Evangelion videos that I just did, because those were really, I think those were really the only two, other than the very short Big Lebowski video. Those are the only two videos I've put out since the Mr. Freeze video blew up because they were really long. But that's, I think you can clearly, knowing that now, if you go back and watch those videos, I think it's probably fairly obvious that you'll see that difference. Because like, the Telltale video, like I take 3 minutes out of the whole video to just explain what a union is. Which, I think even at the time was a little bit more understandable because like, let's go back to the beginning of 2018. Even just when I first started making videos, I don't know that I could have really given you a nice and neat 3 minute synopsis of what a union is and why it's possibly good and why people would want to be in a union. What are the reasons why that could actually help video games. And so, it was a lot easier for me to put myself in the shoes of someone who's like, I mean, like, I've heard the word union, I have an idea, but I don't really know the, basic 1, 2, 3s of what a union is. And same thing with the Ava video. I mean, like, Evangelion is such a huge thing to talk about. Like, even though that video is 90 minutes spread over 2 different videos, like, there's still so much more I could have gone in. I mean, each of those first 5 sections is only like 10 minutes apiece. Each of them could have easily been like 20 minutes. And, I bring up the, specifically, or at least more specifically, how women are treated in that show. But like, that could have been, I could have gone over a whole 50-minute video of just that, really, if I wanted to. But I at least touch on it, and I try and give at least like, a couple specific examples. Because I didn't want to just treat it as like, the show is terrible to women. All right, moving on. That's a bad thing. It's still, and already it still doesn't stop comments from coming in from people who just aren't willing or don't want to engage with that. But I feel better about my stuff now from that aspect of like, just don't make any assumptions. It's just twofold of like, don't make any assumptions that your audience has definitely already seen this stuff. And two, it comes from within and without, right? The second part being that more internal of like, maybe don't be as overly concerned about everything in the video being completely original and just gonna break apart the world and shed new light on this thing that no one's ever, give this new perspective no one's ever touched on before. Because one, that's unrealistic, and even though it's unrealistic, you still find yourself wanting to do that. But two, it actually probably makes for worse videos. And like that's probably the biggest thing I learned from that Mr. Freeze video. And it's, while it's something that I look back on now and wish, I would have done it differently, it is at least important because it's something I learned and it made all of my other videos after that better, which is, that's a good thing. All right, that's gonna do it. I told you there was gonna be a long one. I told you it was a Pandora's box. And I also have said multiple times I can ramble on about just about anything, but yeah, especially when it comes to my own videos, I can really go off on a tangent there. I'm sure this one question video is longer than the last one, which was double the questions. But that's going to do it for this month. As always, thank you all for supporting me here on Patreon. It means the world to me. We're coming up on the new month, so in a couple days I'll put up a new post, and if you're a $5 patron, you can ask another question there, and then around this time next month, we'll do another Q&A video. Maybe just as long, maybe shorter, who knows? It all depends on the questions. If we learned anything from today, I guess if you're having trouble coming up with a question, just ask me about my videos, because apparently I'll talk about them for forever. All right, see you later. Bye.